issues of life that call for resilience and so on. So while causation is not proven, there are more and more studies that are suggesting digital device usage is a contributing factor to loneliness, producing a new situation dubbed phoneliness. We always like to be, scholars always love neologisms. So phoneliness is defined as the uncontrollable urge to pick up your phone and check it, just in case you missed something. Millennials lead on some technology adoption measures, but boomers and Gen Xers are also heavy adopters. So that means most of you in this room, right, are within these three categories right here. Right? My grandma's got one, and she's down here, right, and she uses it every day. Right? My mom is up here, and her battery runs out every day. Right? And then this is where a lot of the people in the room are, and my students, myself. Right. So most of your congregants own a smartphone, just like you do. Right? What are they doing with it? Are they visiting your church website or your church Facebook page? Are they studying a digital Bible? Are they reading a devotion? Are they messaging a small group friend? Or do you think they're doing something else? Right? And I just want to ask, what do you do with yours? Because you're just a human being like everybody in your congregation. Whatever you do with yours is probably what your people are doing with theirs. 95% of teens have a smartphone. So, right, boom, right over there. You can see some of the breakdown. I know this gets small, so that's why I put that arrow in there. This is a 22% increase since 2015. Right, when Pew, this is from the Pew Research Center. It's when they did their last study. At that time, only 73% of teens had a smartphone. So as a dad, I'm living in this world thinking about these things with the pressure of how do I raise a child in this digital generation, right, where it's utterly normal for her to have multiple screens available to her at any given time. Knowing what we know about the way the brain it develops in the first 2 years, we've at least limited almost all exposure and access to screens for both of my children to FaceTime with grandparents who are 2,000 miles away, which is fantastic and a tool that all of us never had if we were born as millennials. So, Steve's probably one of the youngest guys in the room, or the vicar, wherever the vicar is. Where's the vicar? Huh? I mean, not Claude, the young vicar. He's not here?
He's downstairs.
Where's his supervising pastor? I'm just kidding.
That's who said it for God.
What's that?
That's who said it for God.
Oh, very good, very good. Okay. All right. Vicars are lackeys, right? Serve it hard. Thinking about the youngest people in the room, we've never not known a world without this. We haven't always had some of the tools that are available now, like my kids do, as FaceTime with the grandparents. But that's about it. So after 2, then we start letting them see a bit more and so on, because the brain is not developing in the same way, and you can tolerate sort of the constant distractibility and distractibleness that screens and images, even in children's shows, make. But I'm wondering, when should I get my kid a smartphone? And I'm thinking kind of like, no. But, at some point it's going to happen. And so I'm thinking about this partly just driven out of my own parenthood, not only being someone who's just intrigued by the way these devices have impacted our lives so significantly with their massive increase in the last 10 or so years. 45% of teens say they're online almost constantly. So usage of these devices is up and increasing amongst the youngest that we serve. So we have to ask this question: what are the costs? What is actually getting squeezed out? And we have to ask what might be causing this increase. Why is there seemingly this compulsion But, right, not to belabor this as a young person problem. Parents and teens report varying levels of attachment. Teens will report that they spend too much time on their smartphones, 54%, but it isn't too far back from parents. So remember that young people learn via imitation, most primarily. So what they see me doing, they think validates their practice. So what are people doing, right? We're checking for messages. How many teens feel their parent is distracted by their phone when having in-person conversations, right? There's 40% of teens, 30% of parents. Teens feel a lot of pressures, obviously, to stay connected. They're finding their own unique identity amongst their social group. It's a really brutal, fragile time in life. We should be sensitive to that. But teens are also bothered by the fact that their parents are distracted. Not on a huge level, but enough that we should pay attention to. So I want to talk about 3 circumstances that I think foster loneliness, but seemingly should not. The virtual world, the mall, and our own relationships. So the virtual world is the world of social media, where almost all of us have a presence. Is there anyone in this room who has no social media accounts at all? A couple of you. All right. That's good. They're measurably unhealthy. But you also end up feeling socially sometimes left out and disconnected. But simultaneously also freer than a lot of other folks. A challenging question comes up when we use social media. So this is from the Slovenian philosopher Slavoj Žižek. He asks this question: how does each of us know that he or she is in touch with the real other behind the screen, not only with spectral simulacra? And spectral is just another word for ghost or ghostly, and simulacra is just another word for copy. He's a philosopher, so he's using $500 words. But this is I would say, a fair and basic question. How do I know that I'm connecting with the real person that I am ostensibly connecting with, right? Via text message, via Facebook wall posts, via comments on Insta, via sharing snaps and Snapchat, and via posts and replies on Twitter. How do I know that that person isn't just projecting some sort of idealized, more affirmable, presumably more likable image of themselves, and it isn't the real other, right? Because how many of us post on Facebook or Twitter or whatever social media account we have, right? The tough times that we have in life. Now we see some people out there doing bids, very ambiguous, I'm having such a bad day, or I can't believe this happened to me today, blah, blah, blah. And then you ask them about it, and they're like, I don't want to share on social media. And you're like, oh, right? So you're demanding attention, but you're totally kind of breaking what this whole communal endeavor is about. So sometimes I wonder if, in fact, social media, with all of its promises for connectivity, leaves us without any sort of real connections. So I would call it, the anti-community community. As much as it's ostensibly for bringing us closer together, I don't know that it's accomplishing that goal. And then in many ways, especially as social media is being used in our age of outrage, it is fragmenting us further and further apart. So here's a fun question. How many of you have already checked your device at least once, if not more than that, since we've been talking? Hey, some bold people in the back. All right. Thank you for your vulnerability. Are you feeling phonely? Oh, trying to be a little playful here, but also honest. Right? We're looking at data. It's easy to think about this applying to everybody else but me when we look at data. This is about me. It's about us. We're caught up in this too. Right? In different ways. No population is homogenous. None of us engage with this the same. But I think there's something that we need to pay attention to in terms of the data. Sherry Turkle, who's been studying this material for a really long time, she started out studying social robotics at MIT, and what she means by that is whoever made the comment, that the church has sort of given up its service-oriented attitude out in the world. One of the ways that this happens is that we don't care for our old people. We shuttle them off to a lonely existence and some sort of senior living facility or convalescent home. And they're lonely there. And so people are trying to deal with this problem. One of the ways that they do it is similar to the function of how a comfort dog actually brings comfort. But instead of a real live flesh and blood creature, they program, like little furry otter creatures that make, purring, warm, noises that might like robotically be able to nudge you. And somehow through algorithmic programming, they're able to detect, at least in a small, not quite fully human sort of way, when you are feeling lonely or in a bad mood or depressed or something like that. And you've got this soft animal that's moving like a real one that you're able to pet, and it brings you comfort. This is old news, and then she moved into also studying the effects of smartphones and digital devices on the way that we interact with each other socially and the effects that it has on us psychologically. She says our phones are not accessories, but psychologically potent devices that change not just what we do, but who we are. And I think at face value, a lot of us would want to deny the truth of that. No, it doesn't control me. No, I'm not addicted. Of course not. I'm completely in control, right? That's what alcoholics say. That's what some of the people downstairs say. I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's true. I think she's got something on us that we need to pay attention to, right? No, none of us like the law, right? I hate the word that comes to me that I'm a sinner. And I should, right? It's God's alien work. It's foreign, it's strange. It isn't what God wants to say, but it's what he has to say. And I think we've got to wrestle with this truth as well. So when face-to-face conversation ceases to entertain, do you turn to your phone? Or if your sermon isn't very entertaining, do your congregants turn to that? Does your wife, do your children turn to theirs when your sermon is not entertaining? Okay. Now, I don't understand what it's like to be a pastor's kid. My wife paid attention to very few sermons from her own father growing up. I don't know what my daughter will do, but she doesn't see me preach all that often. So we attend a church. My primary ministry is in the university. She sometimes is interactive and really engaged, and we attend in a very traditional setting. I don't see a lot of phones going on in my congregation, but every now and then I do look around, not to be judgmental, but just because I'm interested in this phenomenon, right? We're compelled, almost in a way where we can't not. So sometimes I see it happening. So the mall, I think, offers us a way to use traditionally narrow churchly or religious language about rituals and liturgy and apply it actually in a sociological way. So I would argue that a liturgy is any constellation of rituals and habit-forming practices that are meant to aim us toward a particular telos or good, a purpose or a goal. So liturgy can be any constellation of rituals or habit-forming practices that are meant to aim us in a particular way, to see something as the highest good of life, right? To ascribe almost ultimate value to that thing, right? Jesus as Lord is a form of ultimate value, but it aims us toward a telos, right? A good, an end, a goal, a purpose. In the mall, for those of us who still actually shop in physical places, because I know this is declining as well with the proliferation of Amazon and so much other opportunities to shop online, a lot of times when we go, this is meant to be a social experience. We shop with others. Often, my students will shop with friends or their siblings. Right, some of us shop alone. Again, this isn't homogenous and apply to all of us. But it's a great way of thinking about it. So I shop with others, and here's one of the things that happens. And I apologize, this looks somewhat unreadable to me on my screen. Bad design choice on that slide, sorry about that. James K. Smith, he's a philosopher at Calvin. Some of you have probably heard of his work. I appreciate his work deeply. I don't always agree with it from a Lutheran perspective, because he's a Calvinist, a Reformed theologian. But he has some really great things to say in terms of how he brings the Christian tradition together to bear on analyzing contemporary formational power in our culture. So he says the mall does this to us. We've construed our relationships largely in terms of competition against one another and against the icons of the ideal that have been painted for us. So that would be the posters or the mannequins that kind of show us, here are the threads of the season, right? This is the good life embodied, right? If you have this, then you will be happy, right? Automotive dealerships do this, the Mac store does this, and so on. In the process, we've also objectified others in this competitive process in the way that we construe relationships. We've turned them into artifacts for evaluation and observation, things to be looked at. And by playing this game, we've also turned ourselves into similar sorts of objects, evaluating ourselves based on the success of being objects worth looking at. So when we go to the mall, I'll go to my store, you go to your store, get the things that I want to buy, and then we'll come together and we'll, perhaps even just put on the clothes, right? Or the shoes, or the new purse, or the new gadget from Brookstone, right? And we're wondering, by showing the other what their evaluation of me is in this moment, right? And by myself showing them, I've objectified myself. I've become an object where my affirmation and my being and my identity comes from their opinion. And they do the same. They've objectified themselves to me. So we get, allergic to this idea of objectifying others, and we think about it in terms of pornography. It objectifies women and so on. But it's interesting how we just sort of take this kind of practice for granted. We just do it, right? We show up at Sunday morning wearing, our Sunday best. Do we still do this? I don't know. How many of our people, even in the Sunday morning congregational space, are passing judgment and evaluating others based on their appearance? I heard a couple of guys last night talking about an experiment they did. They pretended to be homeless for a week. Slept outside, got really dirty and stinky. One of them realized they were allergic to cats when they slept inside of a rug. But they went into churches. They visited congregations, seeking, doing that kind of panhandling thing. But they also would slip into the back and sit in worship and see how they were received. And in fact, some of the people that they ran into were people they knew in their congregations. But they were so different in their appearance that those people didn't recognize them, even their own familiar voice. It's an interesting social experiment. So I don't know entirely what they learned. They said they took a lot of notes. But it I think, demonstrates the fact that even in the church, we practice ritually like what happens in the mall. And the social effect of that is a fragmenting rather than a coming together. When I objectify the other, I make them an object that I can control. And I can accept them, or I can deny them and dismiss them. On the basis of what? Am I wearing the right brands? Right? Is that a seasonally appropriate color? That was so last year, right? We do this, it happens. Okay, so are you ready for me to just cut it off for a few minutes? Yeah. All right.
It fits with the mall thing.
Twisted.
Thank you, sir. I've got a friend who is in senior management for Westfield Shopping Centers,
Yep.
and I asked him, hey, what do you think of the decline of the malls? Obviously, they've done a lot of study, and Amazon is principally utilized by boomers. The vast majority of those who use Amazon are boomers. Millennials go to the malls for the sake of community.
Yeah.
Are you able to speak to that?
Well, I would say whatever sort of community is happening at the mall is happening like this, right? I mean, unless you're just wandering around and not buying anything. But how many of us wandered through the mall and thought, I'm not going to buy anything today, walk out with 3 bags in our hand, and we're getting in our car, like, how did I do that? What happened to me, right? And that's the idea of these habit-forming rituals and practices that are even alive in social spaces. We think, we're in control, that we're autonomous individuals, and, in my free will of all things below me, I'm not going to make a purchase today, right? But the mall gets us, right? How do they suck us in to buy that, right? How does Apple get us to pay $1,000 for an iPhone X, right? They just knew that if they priced it that way, we would buy it. It wasn't a question for them, and we did, right? And the new ones just rolled out, and we will do it again, and we'll keep doing it. I don't know how to explain it other than they've habituated us into this way of life, right? These are formational spaces that function liturgically just like the way a church space should.
Amazon is now investing in brick and mortar.
They are, yeah. They are.